Hello and welcome to this episode of The Big Picture. Big Picture where depth meets humor. This is a particularly special episode because you have heavy eaters joining Justine and I. But before I continue, my name is Tom Mukwana. I'm your lead host today. And my co-host is the ever funny
Justine Wanda.
Justine, as always, gracing your screens. But we are not doing this alone. This is not one of those episodes where Justine and I just chat for an hour. On this episode, we're joined by heavy hitters. Gentlemen, I think both of you have been on the show before.
No.
On separate occasions.
Yeah.
It's your first time?
Yeah.
I can't believe that.
Very well, I'm a newbie
No, I think you hosted The Big Picture, Iroko.
in another life.
During the elections in 2022.
You know, you may be right. Was that 2022?
Yes.
That's like 2 generations ago. How would we remember such a thing?
You should. It's just 3 years ago, I think. It's just 3 years ago. But Irungu Houghton.
Right.
Yes, I am right, Irungu. I remember.
Your memory is better than mine.
Obviously.
Keep it in
But Irungu, thank you for coming to the show. Irungu Houghton has advised and held national governments, international and continental multilateral processes publicly accountable for the last 30 years. That's an incredible number.
I started when I was in kindergarten. Early learner, early at that time.
Yeah.
Really fast.
Yeah, you're just now slightly above 30, right?
Yeah, just above.
And he currently serves as Amnesty International Kenya Executive Director. And beside Irungu, we're joined by Alphonse Shiundu. He's an award-winning writer, journalist, editor, and he currently is the country editor for Africa's leading fact-checking organization, Africa Check. Irungu, you also, not Irungu, Alphonse, you are also here in 2022.
Yes.
It's like the elections brought us all back together.
We must have done something very wrong not to come back within 3 years. But anyway, we're going to do our best this evening.
Yeah, you guys should definitely go for our spots, Justine and I. But Justine will be a bit hard kutoa because
She has rank.
and she can throw hands.
Oh, I can fight. I don't only use it for good. Yes.
Yeah, well, that's obviously what she'd say. But aside from Alphonse and Irungu's input into the experiences with what has been happening in the country over the past 2 years, a lot of tragic things, but also maybe you think the good things that happen in the country. But this conversation is specifically going to be about 2 major things. First of all, state surveillance across East Africa, a huge conversation. Africa Uncensored, in partnership with Ukweli Africa, published 2 documentaries over the past 2 weeks, both of them speaking about surveillance and exposing the methods both states, that's Kenya and Uganda, use to surveil their people. But Irungu particularly holds some experience of Tanzania, which has had the most tragic election imaginable. Irungu, just yesterday, the president of Tanzania, President Samia Suluhu, said that she's launched an inquiry into the murders that happened over the past election. That's just a week ago. And some put it at maybe 3,000 deaths. What do you think about that?
No, it has to horrify everybody. I mean, I think the numbers that we're hearing coming out of Tanzania at the moment, we haven't got verified figures because, of course, the cover-up started immediately. But, you know, I've heard testimonies from medical doctors that tell us that on the 29th, 30th and 31st of October, that bodies were brought in large numbers into the public hospitals. And in some cases, they were upwards of 400 bodies. Unfortunately, not only were these people not treated, but plainclothes officers came in and dragged them out of the hospital, some cases from the operating theaters. And the next time bodies were seen, when they were seen, they were essentially being brought to a mortuary. So there has been, I think, a terrible set of mass crimes that have happened in Tanzania. And I have to just say, you know, my history with Tanzania goes back to 1991. I was a student there back in 1991. 35 years later, it is just shocking that there would be this level of violence, wreaked on a population that essentially was just coming out to vote and essentially determine who they wanted to lead them.
Yeah. And Alphonse, you've been doing some fact-checking, maybe?
Yes,
what's happened there.
I've worked in Tanzania, training their journalists and fact checkers. The sad thing is their environment now, and even then, it was really difficult. So a cover-up, we could see how that would be possible because the government is the end-all be-all in Tanzania. They cover everything, and their eyes were. It doesn't help that whenever, like, we were there in April this year, and we couldn't access Telegram, and we were at a meeting on press freedom and digital, and people were telling the government, can you please, the Tanzania Communication Regulatory Authority, my colleagues in Tanzania were saying, can you please allow us to access Telegram? And that was for us one of the ways in which you can have the engagement, because Telegram was big in Tanzania before it was throttled and finally just blocked.
And even Twitter was blocked.
Twitter was blocked. So the issue here, and I can see the challenge for Houghton and the human rights community, it's the same challenge we are facing. How do you verify the numbers? That is our challenge.
Yeah.
Even when the president was saying, oh, we need an open inquiry, there is no acknowledgement of how many people died and how many people were injured and how many people countrywide are being prosecuted for the offenses, alleged offenses related to the protests.
Yeah.
So we can't have a conversation about democratic resilience in Tanzania without having a conversation about the injustices that happened about that, and you can't do that without information. So that's the biggest challenge, especially for outsiders.
Biggie, but like, are the journalists there allowed to report on the same, or is it just like, are you completely not allowed to say anything that the president hasn't said?
There was a journalist who was putting out their context, and we actually so that journalist was explaining that because of national security reasons, they cannot report on anything related if the government says don't. Then there's another journalist who explained that for them, it was actually, they went ahead and wrote an editorial in The Citizen, which is the English paper. And you would read the whole editorial, and it's essentially acknowledging that something happened without saying exactly what happened and how it happened and who should take the blame. But there was something happened. And if you look at the papers after the president's speech during the parliament opening, the narrative on the front page was about maridhiano, reconciliation, mama samehe, forgiveness, and
moving on,
whatnot. So we don't yet know exactly what happened, but I am encouraged. However big the cover up, it's not going to work. Milosevic tried it in Yugoslavia. It didn't work. And whatever the number, the dead bodies usually have voices, and you can't bury them and cover them forever.
Yeah, dead men tell tales. Yeah, for sure. And before we continue with this conversation, I mentioned a documentary by Kweli Africa, a partner of Uncensored. Now we'll run the trailer for their documentary. It's titled Big Brother, Uganda State Surveillance.
My phone is hacked and they hear everything I say.
The Ugandan government has turned into a spying machine.
Very an authoritarian state.
It's when you make yourself an interest for the state, and then we get interested in you.
A widespread of abuses.
They're just punching me in the eye and in the jaws and in the teeth.
The idea of privacy is gone in Uganda.
Sophisticated state system
that is scared of voices of dissent.
Monitoring everyone? No.
We keep on monitoring him, his movements.
We just try to adjust accordingly to be as discreet and as unpredictable.
Kweli Africa teams up with Africa Uncensored to break the oath of silence.
We have capacity to acquire intelligence on anyone.
So they are turning this country into a Big Brother house.
Big Brother Uganda.
Now, Irungu, Alphonse, Justine, that documentary is speaking about Uganda, but we've seen one about Kenya, and we know exactly what's happened in Tanzania. And it's 100% certain that the same thing is happening in Tanzania. maybe at an even more massive scale. So in Kenya, with the revelations that we've had, and Bob Njagi's and Oyo's release in Uganda, there had to be someone surveilling them to know where they were at that moment they were arrested and they were disappeared. What would you say is the state of state surveillance in East Africa?
I think in line with the deterioration of human rights, the rule of law and justice within our region, the use of surveillance technology to essentially invade people's privacy has increased dramatically. And the states, and in some ways it's not sometimes just the state, it is sections of the state, departments within the state that are now beginning to use technology without any recourse to the courts, without any free and prior consent. So essentially, technology is now being used to assist authoritarian practices within our region. And unfortunately, that playbook seems to be a playbook that all the countries in the region are now using. What we have to do is to push back and ensure that, like Kenya, for example, we have legislation, we have laws, Article 31 of the Constitution, the Data Protection Act. These are the laws that we need to prosecute in courts of law to make sure that people do not use the technology unlawfully against their own people. In the case of, there have been various cases of, what we call transnational repression. And that's where agents of one state cross a border and carry out an operation unlawfully on the soil of another country. The case of Kizza Besigye, for example, the case of the Turks that were refiled against refugee law back to Ankara. But more recently, the case we've talked about of Bob and Nick. These are examples of technology being used in ways that are unjust and actually against our human rights.
Yeah. And Justine, is there any way we can run away from this? I know, Irungu, you've spoken about legislation.
Yeah, two clues. Okay, but after just
yeah, I would love to hear those, but Justine, is there any way we can run away from this?
I had relocating is fine. But honestly, I think running away is the wrong solution. Because this is your home, like you should be able to feel safe and protected in a way that, like, because you live in this country, you are kind of entitled to be able to just like move freely without your speech and your like anything you're posting online and all these different interactions you have in your interpersonal and even like with people you have in other countries being monitored for every single thing you're doing. I do have a friend in Tanzania. And when the internet came back on, the first text I sent was like, "Are you okay?" And he took a while to reply because he wasn't also sure like if he should just be talking to me because the surveillance situation is really bad. But then when he answered, I was like, first, I'm very happy you're alive. So I could not inquire more because like what he told me next, like, I can't tell you what's going on here, but I just want you to like keep doing the work that you're doing. It's almost to say like someone has to speak about it because a lot of us are terrified. So the statement about like running away, like where are you running to? The entire world is becoming more hyper surveilled by the moment. We're seeing countries just take it upon themselves to strip people for every single piece of their data. There's something I sent you earlier today where it's I think it's a proposal for the telecommunications registration that's supposed to take people's, I think, ear geometry, your iris. And I'm like, relax. Like, why are we doing phrenology in the year of like our dark Singapore 2025? Like, we actually need to think about what people actually need and not just extract from them and make it dangerous for them to walk around and communicate.
Yeah. But I'm asking this question again. Mm-hmm. Justine, you tell us to fight back, but then how do you fight back? And I ask this because every time we take to the streets, like for instance, this bill, as much as public participation might be against it, it might still go through the Houses of Parliament. As much as we'll push our members of assemblies or parliament to push back, they will not, because private interests come before your interests as a citizen. I say this because I know a lot of people feel defeated by what's happening in the country right now. What can we do really? I understand that you say push back, but Justine, it's like flogging a dead horse, if that's something I can say. because the government is not doing a thing about it, man. Like, me as Tom, I can choose I'm boycotting this telco line because it's giving away my data, but the other one will also give it away. I don't know what you feel, Alphonse.
It really is the logic of power. So you nearly all the people in power, it doesn't matter the country, it doesn't matter whether they are government or private interests, they are looking for control. And when they are pursuing control, data has become one of their currencies in which they can have total control over people. And essentially, that's what they want. So do we need to run away? We just need to understand what it is they are looking for. Usually, it's they want to know who you talk to, your networks. They want to know where you live and who you hang out with, your location. They would want to know your motives in communicating. So they listen to everything that you talk about, and then they try to make a judgment about how you lean. Everything they're collecting, all data points they're collecting, they're trying to get to a place where they can either A, suppress the conversation, or B, control the narrative so that they push people towards certain ends for their extractive capitalistic goals, to make more money, to make more profit, and that's where it ends. And we've seen it in Kenya. I think I was speaking to Eric last week, and the Ugendi. And one of the things that we talked about was, if they took all this information and they sat down with it and used it for good, what would it change? But the logic of power is they never think about what to do for good. They're thinking control. They're thinking, if all these guys get this information, we will be destabilized. We will get out of power. And lastly, just as I wind up, we are in a place where, for years, Irungu was here before us. There were others before Irungu who fought for access to information. There are others who have fought, and it came during Amnesty's time, about privacy laws, data privacy. The fight will have to continue, because that's the logic of the architecture of the state. Has unfortunately that embedded. Doesn't matter the country. These are conversations that people are always fighting about. And when you say people are sort of despondent, they've given up, they are like, yo, the government will do what the government does, that might not work, because there has to be pushback for them to see the limits. Yeah. Right now, they are on the back foot, because they don't understand, and some of us have we've been in spaces where we can see they actually don't understand how that world operates. So because they do not understand, they are taking everything. They could be surgical about it. They could be much humane about how they do that. But the fact that it ends up with kidnapping, disappearances, and all those things, that's why we should be worried about it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because imagine if that was used to curb the crime that we're seeing in the country. Yeah. For example, the serial killers that go around murdering young girls in Kenya, if those could be used to actually get those people. And a lot of people remember this very infamous case of a dismembered body. Sometime this year, the person has never been arrested. When
Quarry killings.
Yes, the quarry killings. And also the young lady, I forget where it happened, but it was a young lady who was dismembered, and there was CCTV footage of the killer moving around. But if the government actually deployed, I see what you're saying. If that was used to solve crime, it would be much farther. But Irungu, I also want to ask you this question. Is there any way surveillance can be justified? Because I'm thinking national security. A terrorist is going to blow me up at a mall next to when I'm standing next to my wife. I would want the government to know where the guy is and what he's doing.
Yeah. I mean, let me stick with the technology and I'll come to the surveillance component. So the first thing I would say that, surveillance is not our greatest concern, if you ask me. It's not the greatest risk to the constitution or to the idea of Kenya or the idea of our freedoms. The greatest risk is that we become fatalistic, we become cynical, we begin to withdraw. Or like Patrick Mackenzie, we begin to use limited information to be able to control the minds of people to a point that you're able to convince 500 plus people to go and fast themselves to death, right? Now, there's a little bit of a link between Patrick Mackenzie and technology, which I don't think people often remember. In 2019, and a lot of this conversation goes back to 2019, the government, the Jubilee administration, then tried to pass about 5 amendments and laws to try and access as much data as possible. This was the era of Huduma Number. This was the era of a cyber security. It was a cyber camera policy that had as one of the provisions that every single public place, whether it be a mosque, a gym, or a church, that they would have to install cameras that are compatible with the national mainframe. And the idea was Big Brother could watch you sitting anywhere in the country and essentially follow you throughout the malls and as you drove into your house and various other places. Now, that didn't quite succeed. Right, and 2019 saw the beginnings of the Data Protection Act. So a framework was introduced, and it is a very good framework. And in a sense, we haven't leveraged it to its best ability with regards to the misuse of technology for mass surveillance for human rights violations. But it's important to recognize that there has been a framework. Most of the legal violations fall under the Computer Misuse and Cybercrimes Act or the Security Laws Act Amendment. And these are 2014 legislation that are still being used essentially to visit on protesters today. So I think it's important to get the technology and the surveillance side. With a light touch, if people are really worried about, being surveilled using their smartphones, I can give them a model of a phone, and I'm not being paid on, African Uncensored to say this, but, our grandparents used to have a phone called Nokia 3310. It was great. No apps, no data, no surveillance, just good vibes. You could just call each other and make appointments. And I think it's important that people recognize that the more power we get from these devices, from these gadgets, the more people want to control us. Right. So Rosenjerry, the software coder, use the technology to allow for millions and of Kenyans to have the opportunity to comment on the Finance Bill 2025. The Nick Wambugo and the Blood Parliament BBC producers, that they're called, they're not quite that, but they used their technology to essentially capture the uprising of the Gen Z. You could go on. Hanifa used crowdfunding, essentially digital platforms, to generate 31 million shillings worth of funding to help people who were going through medical catastrophes in terms of the violence that they had seen. So I think it's important to recognize that the technology is a force for good. And that's why it is such a contested space. So I really appeal to Kenyans is to actually see the technology not as something to be frightened of, but as something to harness and to harness with others. Because if you think about it, with all the technology and all the surveillance capacity that existed in 2024, how come the National Intelligence Services, the Parliament and the Executive did not foresee the potential of people storming Parliament? And right? All that technology still exists today, but it existed a year ago, right? With all the technologies that are there, how is it possible that 500 people would be bludgeoned to death and killed in Shakahola, right? So there is. I think we can create the technology as something so powerful that it becomes frightening to us. But I think it's important to recognize that with this technology has come people's power also.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. In Uganda, it's a lot worse to even be organizing a protest, as Nick Oyo and Bob Njagi were treated in the country. And the president got on a microphone and he said that I put these guys in a freezer, which is just appalling.
Actually, Bob said a freezer. Between the two of them, I think they need to reconcile their stories.
Who it is.
But I would go with Bob's story because he was there.
He experienced it. He was the one being stuck in the freezer. So, he said I put them in a fridge in an interview. And I remember seeing people clapping And every time I go on the internet and there's a video, for instance, I have thankfully I've not seen it in the documentary that we just published, but every time somebody's arrested, for instance, Rose, or the filmmakers are arrested, or God forbid, Justine is arrested tomorrow, God forbid, a huge God forbid.
God will bring the wrath down.
Definitely forbid that.
Justine, I have to say that. Plus amnesty.
Yeah, I will probably not survive. It'll have been nice knowing you all.
let me create that moment, that scary moment. Justine will go into a cell somewhere.
Yeah.
And before long, within 15 seconds, people will be just laughing.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know, she will probably be spirited out for dinner. And then taken back for the evening show.
Yeah.
You know, and as you run out of jokes, that's the point at which they will release you.
Yeah.
Oh, that's terrifying.
Is that? You got lots of jokes.
No, like running out of jokes is terrifying.
Not them get.
No, that's a whole.
They'll be there like, tell us a joke, and all of them are going to be
You
paid.
told us on that program.
Yeah, but Justine, the consequences are frightening for people who speak up against such things. Yeah. And in Uganda, we are seeing what's happening in Tanzania. I believe Tanzania has probably the worst, Tanzania and Rwanda, the worst surveillance technology in East Africa, because we've seen what they've been doing to their people. And the same thing is happening in both countries, that these things happen, but because the media is under control, you never get to hear about them. Justine, what fears does the potential of maybe a telecommunications company giving your data or them buying Pegasus from Israel present to people like you?
I think being terrified is a good place to start, because the first thing that, like when you're interacting with anyone or like you're on your phone, just doom scrolling because the world feels terrifying, it sometimes doesn't occur to you like every single thing you're clicking on, every single thing you're sending is a data point to someone. Like you're just going through your phone and you're using it almost like for entertainment, as like some way to just pass the time. But for another person, this is a way to actually like strip you for parts and like look at the things that you're looking at, what you're interested in, who you're talking to, what DMs you're ignoring. I don't know what they're looking at, but like all these things are very important to them. And even like just sending the wrong message can, or responding to someone who you don't know, or like maybe they've texted you and you feel like, oh, this could be someone I could be probably working with. Like that particular point could actually get you into more trouble, because if you don't have any kind of background with the person you're interacting with, this poses, it's like, so these are the people you're in communication with, these are the people who are funding you, this is like they can kind of create a story about who you are and the kind of way you're operating, and that's the story that can be sold to other people who don't know you. So it's almost like calculating and revising and like some mode of storytelling that can be pushed against the truth of who you are and what you're actually looking at in your communication. So for me, the thing that terrifies me is just like how you're not fully free if you're on any platform, even if WhatsApp is not safe. And like even on WhatsApp, I just mostly text my family. Like if I'm not safe communicating with my family or like sending Tom music, it's like how else can this data be used against me? The other thing that I think that counters this is like I'll ask people to kind of put down their phone more, because sometimes like confuse the person who's stalking you, because like if you're looking at something and then you scroll over it or like you send it, I think it can record all these kinds of points. So like maybe putting your phone down can help you escape, especially if you're not like completely tied to your phone and like your work doesn't depend on it. Living your life outside of it and having meetings like it's 1964, I think like it would probably help you escape the like data point following that is happening to you. But honestly, I don't know what that does to me. Like sometimes I don't feel like there's an end in sight for how we get out of it. It's like for you to be able to get out of the machine, you have to understand how the machine works.
Because Shad did exactly that.
Yeah.
They were meeting.
Yes.
They were not on an app talking.
Yes. because then it's a data point. It's like you sent a message, someone can access it through a backdoor app or whatever, and then now that's how they get you. That's how they figure out what you're saying, who you're talking to, who it doesn't matter whether the things that you're doing are good intentioned. That's not the story, because if it feels like a threat to whatever system is trying to be protected, then you become a target.
It becomes a target
Yeah.
automatically for doing that. Bob Njagi and Nikoyo was recently released, and they gave some harrowing stories about the things that they saw in a military jail. We are going to listen to them, especially Bob Njagi now.
We have the brother to the Internal Affairs Minister, Mtafiri. He's looking for his brother. He was my bedmate. His brother has been in the same place for 4 months. The family doesn't know where he is. They think he's dead. I was in the same cell with a Nigerian man called Ifeanyi Chukwu Nobodo Joseph. Please take that name because we don't know whether he has been released. There are about 6 Nigerian nationals that were being held in those cells. There is Mzee Kasiba. Mzee Kasiba is a very wealthy man in Uganda. He was arrested for 4 or 5 months now. His family doesn't know where he is. John Mary Luchamsi. These are names of civilians being held in military custody as we speak. Yeah, Samuel Nosubuga. These are people that we shared about 14 days with them in the cells. So we're appealing again to the media here to help us highlight these stories so that the President Museveni can know, because he's not even aware of some of these things happening, as I said.
So that was Bob Njagi giving his testimony of what he saw behind bars in a military jail in Uganda. Alphonse, I'm looking at what's happening in Kenya, what's happening in Uganda, and I see in Kenya particularly, because this is where I know and I live, and there are enough stories to tell, is that in Kenya there are certain companies, there could be banks, it could be telecommunication companies, that collect your data, and the moment government knocks their door for that data, they'll give it without asking questions. I don't know how we go around that, because it's everywhere. It's the bank, it's the person you bank with, they'll know who funds you, they'll know who you're associated with through your transactions. It's the people who you use to call your loved ones who have the data of your contact list and everyone that you're speaking to. Is there a way around that?
No, unfortunately, there isn't a way out of that, apart from being law-abiding on the side of the people who are putting out that information. There are protocols on how to access that information. It's not everyone in the bank who has access to the know your customer information. It should not be everyone at a utility firm like Kenya Power who has access to your details. It should not be everyone at a mobile telecommunications company who can just say these are the 10 most recent numbers, or print out your whole contact list over the past month and share it. That should not be possible. But it is possible because, number one, impunity, and number two, there is an element of just bad manners and greed. Yeah, where if you have money and you can pay, and somebody will connect you to somebody who will execute whatever nefarious goals you have. So for the consumer, when we register, when I register with a mobile telecommunications company, I give them my ID or my passport, and I give them all my information of what I do, so that they understand better. What I need is that SIM card to be able to communicate. That doesn't give them the right to now start intruding into my life. But the fact that they do, it's a whole breach of trust, and it's a whole different conversation about the corporate culture versus government overreach. So it becomes quite difficult to prescribe a solution of whether to fight back, and even if you're fighting back and they decide, take your I'm throwing away your SIM card, you go to the next one, it's still the same thing.
Yeah.
So for those of us in the information space, there are little things we can do that qualify as digital hygiene. Number one, yes, they will still track you, but with the 3310 that has been offered.
Nokia phone. This is not a Nokia ad.
Yeah, with that.
Nokia closed down, right? Anyway, that's
Yeah. So the limited numbers of Nokia 3310.
really have to book on River Road for that one.
Yeah. So with the 3310, there are things that you will not give away easily.
Yeah.
So you'll make life difficult for the people who want to follow you around. There's also the bit about what apps are you putting on your phone? What we don't know, and there are some developers who develop apps for this commercial. When they tell you what they see on the back end, for those of us, we just say, wants to access your call log. We say, okay. It wants to access your pictures. Say, okay. Wants to access your text. You say, okay. But you don't know what that access means to the back end. But the people who design the apps, when they tell you what they see on the back ends because you said okay to accessing call logs and accessing messages, it's frightening. So you have to be very clear about what it is you want to do. And even our habits online. There's an author called Shoshana Zuboff who writes about the age of surveillance capitalism, and what she tries to put as a framework, and it scares people like me because of the apps that we use about just how much information we give out. Just as Justin was explaining. Everything, your digital habits are all out there. And unfortunately, we have to click consent
to use
for us to use some of these things. So there are aspects where you have to question yourself, do I really need this?
Yeah.
If I need this, do I have a clean app that I can use? The last thing I'm going to say on this is about the people who were supposed to enforce the law. And it was scary when I saw that the gentlemen who did Blood Parliament, who are alleged to have done Blood Parliament, when they went in, their gadgets were taken.
Yeah.
And I saw a Committee to Protect Journalists report that says, yes, they were given their gadgets back, but the gadgets were infected.
It's spyware.
Yeah. So like what's the end goal of that? That's why I was saying it is really not surgical about the way the government is approaching this.
Yeah.
There are cheaper, because doing that is costly. So there are cheaper, more efficient ways to try and collect meaningful data that would help their intelligence governance goals that they are trying to pursue with their surveillance, rather than this Orwellian police state that they're trying to create.
Yeah. This Big Brother is always watching type of community that they're trying to establish in East Africa. Enough said about that. Get your Nokia, guys. Make sure you get your Nokia and don't click consent, right?
Yeah.
You're saying something.
Checked down.
You're saying something.
I was going to just say, I mean, I guess put it slightly differently. So data is a $1 trillion shilling industry, right? That's the first thing. So everybody's chasing data and your personal information. And the question of surveillance now, I think, is a very topical debate, I think, at very many levels. Should parents spy on their children? Should employers spy on what their employees are doing during the workspace? And ultimately, the one we've been discussing is, should states have the capacity to track citizens, whether it's their consumer habits, whether it is their love habits, whether it is their lending habits, whether it is their political habits, right? That's the debate we're having. I think the key thing within the Data Protection Act, which I think people need to spend a bit of time reading and just getting intimate with, is this idea of informed and prior consent. The legal framework is that nobody should have access to my data without informed prior consent. In the context of states essentially trying to disrupt serious crimes, whether it be money laundering or terrorism or something like that, the law is very clear that you have to go through a court to be able to extract an order to be able to do this. And that's why, for example, in the case, of Boniface Mwangi, when he was slapped with terrorism charges, the ODPP actually revised those charges when Boniface was brought to court because they had not followed the procedure. So I think, I don't want to leave people listening to us today with a sense of fear. And just to be very clear, and I hope this doesn't come back and bite me, because I'm not going onto a Nokia 3310. I just enjoy apps too much, and I enjoy browsing, and I enjoy social media. And much as X has become what it has, I enjoy being able to communicate with large numbers of people. But I think it's really important that people continue to use the technology to its fullest. It has power. And to withdraw from it and go back to 3310 is to actually give up that power in the face of something that we've all abandoned many years ago.
Yeah. Good point to make. It's actually a very great point to end this part of the conversation and go to the next one. Justine, President Ruto gave an interview to talk to Al Jazeera, and he rated himself an 8 out of 10. We just do a quick round of introduction, excluding me. Of exactly how he is rated.
No. You're also like
I'm supposed to be in the middle here, guys.
No, this is not this moment.
Objectivity. In the middle. Exactly, but not you today. Not you today. You're not allowed to be in the middle. But Justine, 8 out of 10. Do you agree?
Wait, do I agree with that score?
Yeah.
Or am I giving my own rating?
Do you agree with that score, and what would you rate him?
No, like you can't score yourself, even if like you cannot see what is happening. You cannot just like give yourself an 8. Like to me, like a 0.1 at best is like a good place to start. Like that's my a 0.1. Like that's a good place to start. And then you can work.
What's the 0.1 that gave you that mark?
First of all, it was just going to be like a flat 0. But then the 0.1 is because like a lot of my friends are still alive while the economy is falling apart. So that's where.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's still a population.
Yes. So still, I still have community. If my community disappears, then I think I might.
0.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Irungu?
So I'll do it from our perspective in terms of the work we do in Amnesty, which is on human rights. I think, we have seen a serious slide towards enforced disappearances, extrajudicial killings, misuse of state power, excessive use of force. I could go on and on and on just over the last couple of years. So, much as I think there was a lot of promise at the beginning in terms of I will bring an end to the extrajudicial killings we saw in Yala, we have seen really probably the worst forms of human rights abuses since 1991, I would say. And therefore, I would probably do a 3. And that's the 3 is simply for the stuff that may be happening in the socioeconomic realm. But I think on human rights, we've seen a major reversal.
So you got an F on human rights.
Yes. And actually, if I think back, for the Jubilee administration, we gave them a D on human rights towards the end of their period. So as a country, we're moving backwards.
Yeah, so he essentially beat himself at being horrible at human rights.
Yes.
Because he was deputy president at that time.
Yeah, if you excuse the fourth president.
Okay. And Alphonse?
Yes, this is the point where I say once we start debunking the claims, we'll actually see what rank he has.
Okay. Yes. So you'll sit this one out until you've looked at the claims.
Can I be objective?
No, I will. With every claim, we will do the math together, and then you will see objectively where do we rank him.
That's a nice way of doing it. Okay. So he made a few claims, Alphonse, at the interview. He obviously gave himself an 8 because he thinks he performed perfectly. He thinks he's the best president Kenya has had. He's actually said this, that he's the best president Kenya has had since, I think, Kibaki, or I think he even rates himself above Kibaki. But that aside, he made some claims at the interview, Alphonse. Claims about the economy, education, healthcare. What do you have to say about those? Are they true or are they completely false?
So if we start with the first claim, where he says Kenya is now number 6 in the rankings of the economy in Africa. And he says that is because of the things he has done. We went and looked at the data. So what we realized is what he is using is the nominal GDP that the IMF puts out. The most recent data came out in October this year when the IMF put out the World Economic Outlook this October, and that ranked Kenyan number 6. But when you look, what we do in fact checking at Africa Check is zoom out. What number were we in 2021? Number 6. What number were we in 2022? Number 8. Why? It's an election year. Economy slows down. Number two, those who are ahead of us, Angola, the kwanza, their currency, was being devalued. It depreciated. And then the oil prices, which keep the Angolan economy, it's an oil-producing country, oil prices stabilized, came down. So the economy shrank. One other country was Ethiopia. Ethiopia had a war. Its currency has been, the birr, has depreciated. So now those two countries, because they were on fire, we took back our position at number 6. It's not that there was something miraculous we did, but the numbers were here. So all he did was come in, keep the economy where it was, and these are projections for IMF, and that's why I'm like, okay. But the most fundamental thing is, we're sitting here. He says we're number 6. So, what does that mean to Justin or to you?
Yes.
What does it mean? The economy has grown? Does it mean you guys have more money in your pocket? What exactly does being number 6 mean? And what does that, is that ranking even significant for a person who says we need to go the Singapore way? Singapore is what, about 570, depending on what data you're looking at, 570 billion US dollar
in GDP.
In GDP, or some data is putting it at 700 billion. So when you look at Kenya's economy, it's at what, 20% of that?
Yeah.
And you are wondering, okay, if that is the goal, why are we patting ourselves in the back for doing just the basic? Because he wasn't elected to tank the economy; he was elected to grow the economy. So those are the kinds of stories. So why is he telling a story like this at this time? And that then becomes our question in our fact check.
Yeah.
So with that, I think you can rate him on the economy.
What did he say? Well, on the economy, what do we agree with him, guys? Well, Irungu will say, do you want to?
Babes, 0 sufuri, like the art. Because honestly, I think I'm just speaking as someone who's like walking around and trying to survive here. And I think even if I've earned a little more because of all my hard work, I think I am making, like I have less. Because more people, like my survival has become very expensive and I'm just a single entity. So if I have to even just like check out a little bit of my income to pay for electricity, which is now, I feel like I'm paying like 3 times more I was paying like a couple of years ago, that's a strain to me. Like if what is it called? Like 1 unit is more expensive, it just means I have less money in my pocket. If the electricity cost is impacting some of the goods I'm buying, obviously I'm going to be spending way more for way less. Like you're buying 3 items and then you have to do like an economic prayer at the counter that your M-Pesa balance will be able to hold. It's, to me, it's a 0. Honestly, bro, nimejam.
It's even going down. It's lost 0.1.
No,
because 0.1%.
Yes, because as a person who also pays black tax, because like if you have people in your circle, and a lot of us survive because of community, like that, you can't abandon the people in your life just because you want to be able to save. Like that's not a practical approach. So that means a lot of us are spending on survival and then we have nothing left. And then you just hope that next invoice hits your account before like all your needs now surpass. And then you become even more in debt.
And thank you for bringing that up, because that is exactly what we want him to see. Yeah, there is a story that Kenyans have. Their real earnings have gone down. Yeah. Their life is a struggle. And when he talks these big numbers, he's missing that story. And then he is not trusted. He is not credible.
Yeah.
And because he's not credible, it becomes difficult for him to move. Like the social contract is loose. It becomes difficult for him to convince people to walk in a certain direction. And when people can't walk in a certain direction, then there is all this resistance, and he can't understand why.
But Alphonse,
because his lived reality and the lived reality of the people.
But Alphonse, I'd like to throw a span in the works here.
Yes.
he's speaking about figures like GDP. Well, what you're saying is he actually said the truth, just that there's a lot more context that he missed.
No. Then what he gave were correct numbers.
Yes.
The truth is very
The truth is it's very relative. Okay. So what isn't relative is that the price of some commodities has gone down. When he took office, unga, for instance, was 200. This is something he loves to say. It was 200, and now 2 kgs of unga goes for 170, 165. Justine is nodding.
No, it's 195 at my local duka.
But the fact of the matter is it was 200 in around April 2022. He took office. He says it's because of the fertilizer subsidy. He says that he lowered the price of cooking oil. And if you look at the data, it actually is to some extent true. Inflation has gone down. I'm just looking here in 6.6 in 2022, and now it's 4.6 in October 2025.
Tom, let me come into this a little bit. So about 5 years ago, I was in a conference with about a large conference, 500 people. Tunisian Minister for Statistics and Tourism. How they put those two together, I have no idea. But anyway, in Tunisia, they had such a person. And he stood up and he started saying, Tunisia, at the time of the insurrection, the economy was doing really well, inflation was down, cost of living was down, and so on. So he kept going for a long time. So I put up my hand. I said, look, Mr. Minister, I get all this, and I'm not going to challenge you on your data, but why did people go to the streets and topple your government in favor of a military government? And he looked me in the face and he says, I don't think the people on the streets read our reports. Mm-hmm. And it was such an important point, because what I figured is that actually it's not so much about the data, it's about the understanding and the lived experiences of people.
Yes.
Right? So what does it mean for the first time in Kenyan history for people to, first of all, reject a finance bill? It has never happened before in the 60 years that we've had it. Secondly, to actually invade a parliament because they feel that the parliamentarians have betrayed them. Right? Surely that is a macroeconomic statistic, right? Or, for example, if you look at the issue of, the polls that we keep hearing, right? They have been fairly consistent. Anywhere between 65 to about 75% of the population feel the country is going in the wrong direction. So I kind of, I don't have much opportunity these days to talk to BSS people and maybe the presidential advisors in State House and the good man David Ndee. But, my question is, you can have all the statistics you can, but if people on the ground are not just giving you 0.1% of a grade, but are actually angry and rebellious, then you have a problem. This economy is not working for us. There's a long time, when we moved to become a lower middle income country, it was Cabinet Secretary Waiguru made this announcement, and we all got excited because suddenly we thought now we've left Tanzania behind and, Mozambique and so on. I said, but GDP is actually a very stupid metric, because it's the equivalent of your neighbor having 6 cows, you having none, and then they declare the whole village is an average of 3 cows, right? Whereas there is a bulk of people who have no cows at all, right? So I think we have to be a bit more sensitive to what is the felt experiences of Kenyans.
The rich are getting richer. Safaricom, for instance, is making banks
are doing well.
Banks are doing well, but are the people doing well? No. And
so the thing that you were putting to show that prices of goods have come down, that is the cherry-picked story that is usually told. So we've checked these numbers since 2023 because it keeps being repeated. Oh, inflation has gone down. Mm-hmm. Inflation slowing doesn't mean the prices have come down. It just means they are rising at a slower rate. Mm-hmm. So the cost of goods was still going up, but at a slower rate than it was back then. Yeah. So that is the number, because they would show you it was 9.2%. Yeah. Now it is 3.8, and then they would say that is progress. Mm. Yes, it is progress, but how it don't conflate the slowing down of inflation with the slowing the coming down of the cost of
prices.
living.
Yeah, because at the same time your salary is not increasing.
Yeah. Because those are things that we need to understand and put out. For the person in the street, those numbers can be put out quickly, and it can be said, this was those data points, and this is the problem. They have better data that would show that they are making life better for people, but they are not using that data. What they are trying to do is to force data to fit the narrative. Yeah. So, for example, they would come and say the US dollar was 160. It's now 130. And then you would look at it and you'd be like, no, it wasn't 160. You found it at 125. You took it to 160. Then you took it to 128. So it's not something, you don't create a mess
and solve it,
and then come and solve it.
It's like digging a hole and then filling it in halfway and saying, look, the hole is only half.
Yeah, you're doing better.
Yeah, there's a lot of recency bias. And just to add to Alphonse's point, like there's a very clear metric that GOK keeps using to like do all this front-facing PR. I was reading like a summary of what I think they're Nobel Prize winning economists. They were saying the way people calculate the success of a nation or the failure of a nation is very skewed. Even African countries have this huge problem where they're chasing like the data points of like the people who they're in economic partnership with, like usually the IMF and the World Bank, but then they're not looking at the people living in those countries and their well-being and their economic progress and their economic participation as a data point. So if you're not even in the grand scheme of things like part of the conversation, how are they planning for you? It's like, I don't care what's happening to you, but look, inflation is down. Inflation is down, yes, but in relation to what? Is it like where do I come in? So unless I'm inside that conversation where it's like, if this is what is happening and then it's felt on a personal level, on an economic level in my community, that 0.1 would not be a rating I would give. But like because I don't see it happening for me, then it's the zero. It's pointless.
I think there's something we have to also kind of push a little bit, because I think this, all governments all over the world will, and we cannot begrudge that, they will spin numbers to their interest, right? So I don't begrudge the president that he has the self-confidence on Al Jazeera and so on. But I think what we need to see is a lot more kind of fact-checking and analysis that brings it back to the common person. Are we less frightened of getting sick today than we were 2 years ago? Are we less frightened of what our children are going through in terms of the education system now than 2 years ago? Are we eating better? Are we clothing better? Are we driving better vehicles? Are we going beyond Nokia 33.1? Whatever it is, right? But I think that's the conversation that Kenyans need to start generating. And then as we are, of course, now in the electoral season, 2 years before an election, it is really important for us to keep asking all the political parties and all the political aspirants who are coming before us, what is your agenda that would take us beyond where we are at the moment, right? And I think that conversation is not being generated enough. And perhaps, one of the things we learned from the Gen Z uprising last year was that there are a lot of very talented people, very clear-minded people who are very interested and passionate about different parts of the economy. How do we unleash that creativity and that thinking so that if it is not, being adopted in this period, at least we're now beginning to create a mind bank for the future in terms of policies. I think that's a conversation that we could start happening. So, for example, if Alphonse, we let's appoint him as Minister of Health for just a minute or two, what would he do with Shashif? Right? If, Justine became, let me think.
Minister for Enjoyment.
That one is too easy. Let's give us something more serious. Interior. Interior. Right? How would you reform the police service? Good. No, you don't have to answer right.
Yeah, I was just like,
the idea is one thing.
I was just going to say, like, fire a bunch of people.
Fire everybody and then...
Yeah, I was just going to, like, we actually just need to do no police for a year and just see where this goes. Just like, let us vibe, let's, no. But like, it would be, I do understand that, but yeah, like, what do we look like without like heavy over surveillance
Yeah,
policing?
for sure.
Yeah.
There was also that other claim.
Which one?
About,
Yeah, you're actually Minister of Health. I wanted to go to SHA.
No, drop people in it now.
No. So are we less frightened?
Yeah.
That's the question. Are we less frightened when we get sick to get sick? That's he says the numbers have increased from 8 million.
Numbers of SHA.
Numbers of SHA members.
Yeah.
From 8 million to 25 million or thereabouts. What's the total labor force of Kenya? Yeah. It's about in the region of 19 million to 21 million. So he's counting dependents in there. How many people are formally employed in Kenya? 3.5 to 4 million. He's counting, he's not talking about those because those are the people who are shouldering the bulk of the SHA. These are the other people who are paying are in informal. 83%, the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics says, of the economy is informal. So when you ask them, what does that mean? What is the informality in the economy? Because that's the economy. Yeah. Like if it's 83% of something, that really, it's an informal economy. Yeah. So why aren't they shouldering that thing and they're reducing your disposable income? Yeah. So those are the numbers that we need to interrogate. The number 25, 26, 20, whatever number he gives it, it doesn't make sense to people. Yes, more people are registered, but the question remains, what is your experience with SHA? Anecdotally, they would be sponsored hashtags, which you have tracked, we have tracked, sponsored, which say that SHA is working. Then they are also very painful narrated experiences of people crying in hospitals. A member of parliament complaining in parliament about the horrible experience they had with SHA compared to NHIF. Whatever you say about the politics of that, the lived realities of the people, there is a disconnect between what the political sphere or the policy sphere imagines they're delivering to the people and what the people are experiencing on the ground. Yeah. And that is a problem.
It's a disconnect that we're seeing across all these claims that you just monitored. But Irungu, he also made a claim about employment.
Yes.
Yes. And I know that Amnesty has been working or did work on a campaign about domestic workers, particularly in the Gulf. And a recent New York Times report says that Kenyan workers are getting jobs abroad because they are cheap labor.
They're paid to me.
That's just mind-blowing to imagine, but that's the data the president uses.
Yeah. So I think, first of all, the government policy, the migration policy, was a strange place to start. I mean, if you're thinking about a country that has high numbers of unemployment, the idea that you would rely on other people's economies to employ them is a strange place to start, particularly given Africa's history with slavery, right? So you're exporting, black people into white economies at a time when racism is on the resurgence, right? So I as Amnesty, we have really had concerns, particularly about all the xenophobia and the migrant, tension that you're seeing in Europe and the United States. But for the domestic workers, there has been a particular hard, kind of reality that they faced when they went out there. They are bumped up against something called the kafala system, which essentially is a system that is almost chattel slavery. I mean, it's modern, but it's very much based on the same principles. The idea that once you contract with an employer, you have to remain with that employer, or you have to come back to Kenya, right? And there are no labor safeguards. Unlike the Saudi, employees, there's no labor safeguards for them. And the brunt of that is being felt by women, particularly young women, and most of them are people who have gone because they have nothing that this economy can offer them. And therefore the level of desperation is very high. I think the New York Times, and there's a series, it's actually people, I really remind people, not just read one article. There is a series of articles. I have not seen a government response yet, parliamentary or executive, that befits the horror that those women have gone through.
Yeah. And Alphonse, you can chime in Irungu as well. The president and his family and a cabinet secretary and also a leader of a national parastatal are found to own shares of these companies that are benefiting to some degree. For the president, for instance, is the insurance company that he profits from is insuring these ladies that are going abroad and working for this cheap labor. But recently we just passed the conflict of interest bill. It doesn't make sense to me at all that the president, the highest office in the land, is using the power he has to sign policy and make policy happen in the country to profit. It just doesn't make sense to me. How do you see it?
One other thing that will not make sense to you. Every Kenyan, for them to apply for an ID or for them to get a passport, they have to go to a cyber. They have to fill out the forms or get help to fill out the forms for them to apply. So you have to be on eCitizen. Our good members of parliament, they receive e-procurement regulations and they argue that not every Kenyan can apply for government tenders electronically, that it is discriminatory. And so you get to a point where you're asking, the people who apply for government tenders worth millions and billions and they have to put a bid bond and all those things, those are people who hire top dollar lawyers. They have farms, even if they are tenderpreneurs, they have access to broadband. But for a person in the village who has nothing, they have to go to a cyber. And yet the MPs frustrated the e-procurement bill because of the transparency that was going to be there for these tenders, so that we know which company got what tender, at what price, who are the beneficiaries of that tender. And this story is just one of those. It's not a new thing in the stealing network or the stealing architecture that pervades all governments. But when you see it written, and when you see the proxies that are said to belong to the highest office in the land, and you see the kind of business there, there is a small-mindedness to it that you wonder if we want to take this country to where it is said they want to take, there is an averageness of mind that we should not entertain, especially at the leadership level.
Yeah. It's a mediocrity, if I'm honest. And we are now getting to the home stretch, unfortunately. Before I let Justine and our guests speak, we have a session called Public Participation on every show we do. This episode will be like last week's episode dedicated to the Public Participation Bill of 2025 that is now open for your participation. You can send your memoranda to the Clerk of the National Assembly by post office. You can hand deliver to the office of the Clerk of the main Parliament buildings in Nairobi, or you could even email it to cna@parliament.go.ke by Wednesday, 19th November. That's in 2 days. This bill will control the public participation mechanisms of the country, because this is something that has been abused recently. There are a lot of things that still need to be answered, questions that are still unanswered in the bill as it exists right now, and it's important for you to read it and submit your memoranda. Perhaps we'll have a show on this particular bill or give it a chunk of the next episode. But Justine, what do you have to say?
I think first of all, make sure you send in your contribution on the public participation bill. But this, I just wanted to revisit a story I saw this week of the Kenyan worker who was being beaten by a Chinese colleague. I think the place is called TMC Roofing Mabati Supplies. So I'm going to try and coin a phrase right now. Like, I think that we, as a country, we're experiencing something called the madharawification of labor. So, first of all, I'll just like to say, like, Kenyans have resilience. They're adaptable. They can learn any skill. But then this comes with a mistreatment because most people, again, as Irungo pointed out, a lot of Kenyans are desperate. A lot of Kenyans want to work. They don't know where to start. And usually when someone offers them work, they're very happy to start and like just get in there and do the work. But apparently when you get a job, however small, however big, you kind of have to start taking self-defense classes because you don't know who is in charge or who you're working with. And usually there's an entitlement by people of other races. We've seen the Chinese national was beating up a Kenyan worker, and even though the Chinese embassy was like, we're very appalled at this, and I think they're looking to deport him. Sorry, not export, deport him back to his country. It also speaks to the level of degradation that work is taking in this country. Usually, there's a headline that was published, I believe, by the Standard a week ago, like 2 weeks ago, about these workers who were protesting about a terrible work environment, and the way that the headline had been written was like, drama as workers. And I'm like, this is not drama. This is actually a labor issue. This is a very critical issue to a lot of people's lives. So the moment you don't value someone's work because maybe you're paying them very little money and you think because they're desperate and they can't get a job elsewhere, that madharau compounds in the way those people are treated. It compounds in the way those people are paid. It compounds in the work environment that they have to live in. And we can also see in how the exploitation, like the cheap labor exploitation that we're seeing, also has the same components. Because Kenyan workers going to work in the Middle East are being paid 40% less than like another migrant worker, like for instance, someone who's from the Philippines. But then Kenyan workers don't get any protections. Like you're just over there vibing, hoping that you get a good boss who kind of respects you. But the problem is that cannot be the standard. You cannot go with the vibe of protection of an employer. It has to be the preset standard of like the nation that you come from, that their sovereignty also walks into the rooms that you're not in before you go there. And this like the two small madharaus that you see here, and then people are like, why are they not stepping up and saying something? I think a lot of people are just terrified to lose their jobs, and they know the reality that their trade unions, their labor unions will probably not protect them. They're willing to sacrifice their own protections to keep the job, because that Kenyan worker ended up shaking hands and forgiving the person who clearly assaulted him and degraded him in like a terrible way. And we really, really should end this motherfication of Kenyan labor. Every single person's work matters. Every single work environment should be safe and conducive for Kenyans to work.
Good point to close it out, Justine. Irungo, Alphonse?
So on the public participation bill, Kenyans, they're, if I can simplify, they're just four types of Kenyans. And they're not ethnic groups. One are Kenyans who are sleepwalking. They're not participating in public affairs and governance. They just hope that everything will fix itself at some point, but they just keep moving. And there's no judgment where you are. So if you've never been to a county integrated development plan session or a budget session for your ward, you're a sleepwalker. But it's not a criticism. I'm not mother. What did you say? Mother? Yeah, that one. I almost went in another direction. The second group is the ones who are pleading the whole time, the complainers. The ones that see things going wrong but actually don't take any action, but enjoy the idea of complaining. The third group is those who are, those who are petitioning. Those who are actively engaged in demanding for better roads, better streetlights, better classrooms, better hospitals. And the fourth group is the protests. So those are the four types of Kenyans. And I think what's really important about the public participation bill is that it gives us a parameter within which now to legally hold consultation accountable. So there's some great things in the bill. Like, for example, this idea of online submissions, the idea that I physically have to go and sit there for 5 hours for a county or a ward administrator to show up before I can say what I need to happen in my ward. Yeah. That's gone. You can submit online. The second one is this idea that there would be a time frame within which the consultation is to take place. You remember those adverts in the newspapers? the ward consultation is happening 48 hours from now, 2 days from now, and you're like, I've got my whole work plan. Anyway, you can't do it. So there's going to be now guidelines around that. The third area, which I think is really important, is that there will now be fines for state officers who do not comply with the law, because there were no consequences in the past. So I think there's some very good things that are there. The things I think we need to work on, and this is where those of you who may be interested to, to support that, that bill to become an act, is essentially, I don't think there's enough thought that's gone into artificial intelligence and the use of machine learning to be able to do this. You remember Rosenjerry, she did this wonderful little app, micro app, that allowed us to be able to communicate what we wanted to be in the finance bill and what we didn't want to be in the finance bill. She needs to be, let's go back to employment. Hundreds of thousands of people like her need to be employed by government to figure out what happens when 56 million people comment on a bill, right? How does the algorithms, how does the machine essentially strip that into a language that the policymakers can understand, so that next time Rosenjerry helps Kenyans to be able to make a reference on, or rather to make a petition on the finance bill, the finance committee has a Rosenjerry who knows how to deal with what happens when tens of thousands of people start writing to you when you only expected 50, right? So I think that's the area there. Lastly, I just wanted to end up by thanking Africa Uncensored for the documentary that you've just done on surveillance. That's what anchored this conversation. And just to point out, 2 days from now, Amnesty International has a report on how mass surveillance has been used to target and to harm Gen Z protesters. So we will continue that conversation, and hopefully we will get a response from the state that this way of policing, this way of governing is no longer going to be taken forward in future. If that's not the case, then we will go back to the courts and we will essentially protect people through the legal framework.
Yeah, and just to give you back the gratitude, thank you for what you're doing at Amnesty as well, just raising your voice and speaking up for the people. Alphonse, your parting thought?
I will go to the last rating.
Please do.
Yes, on the fact check about housing.
Mm.
It's very problematic. If I ask you how many houses have been built in Kenya since 2021, what is the number that comes to your mind? If you check the treasury records, you listen to the president, when he was in Al Jazeera, he said 230,000 houses are being built. 230,000 are being built.
By that you mean units or?
Housing units.
Okay.
Housing units. So houses. So now, the thing is, when you look at the numbers of those houses, don't forget his promise. His promise in his manifesto is 200,000 housing units a year. 1 million in 5 years. It says very clear in the manifesto. This is year 3 going to year 4. He's saying he's building 230,000. When you look at the cement consumption, it's been going down. When you look at steel consumption, it's been going down. But his story is he's building those houses. So the question then becomes, with what cement? With what steel? And where are these houses? 230,000. When you deduct money from people as housing levy, and you say you're putting that money into treasury bonds, what does that say about the policy making? And I'm giving this absurdity because it is not new. In 2018, 2019, President Kenyatta came up with this policy. At the time, we checked and we found out that 60% of Kenyans live like they are homeowners. And of these homeowners, about 88% of them did not take a loan, did not take a mortgage to build a house. And when we put this data out, that policy, together with the other protests that were going on, the whole conversation was put into context. But right now, we're building houses that people don't need because we say we are creating 600,000 jobs. But when you look at the data from the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, the jobs in the construction sector, where housing is domiciled, where we should be thinking about a boom. The jobs between 2022 and now, there's a net drop of 3,000 jobs. Now you're asking, okay, but the president will tell you the 230,000 houses are going to create 600,000 jobs. And you ask how? From where? So there are those tiny numbers that he keeps repeating, and then you wonder what it is, what is wrong with it. And this is now where I bring the public participation. They were told, nani hana nyumba kwao. You remember that mzee? Asking nani hana kwao. That was public participation. All these people spoke against it, but it was bulldozed. Yeah. The worry for me, as this bill comes for public participation, is what portion of the feedback will be implemented? What is the threshold of that feedback? Yeah. That would then, and how do we know? It's not enough to say, oh, we got 50,000 submissions, or we got 200 submissions on this. We need a summary of the submissions. We need what was taken on board by those. We need to see. There has to be a trail of, oh, this is what they said. This is what but I see it as, and I worry, because the optimism that we have about all these new things that are coming to the bill, there is always some mischief. Because every time the government passes laws, the thing that most people rush to court is to say there was no public participation. So right now, they could be creating a checklist that would then say, this has been done, like the performative nature. This has been done, this has been done. So there was public participation, and they move on. So that for me, that is the biggest worry. We need a track record of how much of the public public feedback has been incorporated. And then we also need transparency of what that feedback has been done, or else the mischief is gonna win here. And thankfully, the judiciary will have to step in and correct, because this is one of the national values that are in the concept we hold.
Yeah. Alphonse, you're not going to run away from this. What's the rating? If you aggregate all of those that you've said, the housing, employment, all those.
Okay.
We have 0.13.
230 out of 1 million times 100.
Jeez.
Gives you what?
You know what? I might have the figure. Well, yeah, you just do the math. You don't know. But gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for your time, Alphonse, Irungu, Justine. As always, thank you for co-hosting with me. Pole, just sip some water. But thank you for joining us again this evening. But before we wrap up, again, let's run the two trailers to the surveillance series, the one in Uganda and the one in Kenya. I hope you go and watch the full documentary, and have a good night.
My phone is hacked and they hear everything I say.
The Ugandan government has turned into a spying machine.
Very unauthoritarian state.
It's when you make yourself an interest for the state, and then we get interested in you.
A widespread of abuses.
They're just punching me in the eye and in the jaws and in the teeth.
The idea of privacy is gone in Uganda.
Sophisticated state system
that is scared of voices of dissent.
Monitoring everyone? No.
We keep on monitoring him, his movements.
We just try to adjust accordingly to be as discreet and as unpredictable.
Ukweli Africa teams up with Africa Uncensored to break the oath of silence.
We have capacity to acquire intelligence on anyone.
So they are turning this country into a Big Brother house.
Big Brother Uganda.
In Kenya, someone is always watching.
I think we are all being watched. If they need more, they'll still get me.
Kenya has seen an increase in abductions, disappearances, arrests, and killings.
Now to a top story. Concern is mounting over the discovery of dead bodies of missing persons in the wake of increasing cases of abduction in the country.
Last year, after people broke into parliament, there was a lot of death and element of sadness and the realization that it could have been any one of us.
State surveillance is a complex task with far-reaching implications. Its actors are agents working in the shadows, drawn from the intelligence service or the police, but working in secret.
In the intelligence world, mobile phone is vulnerable to ubiquitous surveillance.
We ask the question, what does the state do when nobody's watching?